Hi, my name is Mike Bartig, and I get the privilege of making this video tonight. I don't have a crowd in front of me, it's just me, but that's okay. Conditions weren't favorable for having an audience, so I will solo it, but we'll pretend like we have an audience and things will go fantastic. Our session learning goal is to apply the STAR Reading State Standards Report. That's our most important report, through the lens or the conceptual framework of the classroom teacher, the student. I typically start presentations with some type of a warm-up, get the crowd energized, gauge the crowd to find out, do I have a wow crowd or a more reserved crowd? And then I tailor the warm-up activity. Lively crowd, I might use string of pearls, which is where you have a line of attendees stand up, and you start with a statement and you end with a statement, and the ending statement is typically where you want to go with the presentation. For example, tonight we're going to talk about the student growth report. For example, where that had started and finished in a previous presentation, I asked for a common household object for the first person, and then we knew the last person in the string of pearls was going to say, and now I fully understand how student growth reports work. Someone said a giraffe, and in true improv fashion, which is what that is, we went with giraffe. And so the first person said, wow, I have this giant giraffe in my home and I use it to reach tall objects. And then the next person in line said something to the effect of, yes, it is a very big giraffe and it just licked me and it's a boy. And the first person said back, yeah, it's hard to not tell that it's a boy. And then eventually we laughed our way to a solution, which was, I now understand how to run and use Renaissance Learning Student State Growth Reports. What we do is build vulnerability-based trust. And we talk about that it's okay to make a mistake, it's okay to look silly in front of other people. That's what we do when we learn, we make mistakes. Innovation usually starts with making mistakes and looking silly. My top list probably of statements that I've used to warm up a crowd is, sit down if you haven't used deodorant in a whole week. So you get to laugh. You're good looking, but you're not conceited. You regularly pick your nose when you know no one is watching. If that is true, sit down. You've gotten a traffic ticket in the last month. You've practiced singing in front of the mirror at some point in your life. You have a tattoo that people don't know about. Really kind of funny vulnerability-based statements. Yes, and I think it's a terrific book is one of the most important things we do when we start a session, and that is to have you tell me what you would like to see us achieve today. How can you fill in the blank? What would I have to do to be able to do this? Whether it's run a specific report, or maybe it's generating some conversation around how to get parents involved in state standards. How do I take a Renaissance Learning State Standard Report and correlate it to an actual state assessment report? Thank you for the Post-it note activity. I see a lot of great questions coming up, a lot of reports that you want ran. We will take some time at the end of this session, and I will not leave until all your questions are answered. Dedicated schools platform. So on your computer is an avatar. You've clicked on it many times. You've used the program for 4 years here. Click on I'm a teacher and an administrator and log in. If you have trouble logging in, let me know and I'll come around and help you. Okay, so everybody's logged in. We're ready to run the district standard report. It's a chance for PLC teams to isolate a sub-skill and respond to it. It could be a big part of the PDP plan, your professional development plan. When you're evaluated, this is a great place to find a mutual ground with your principal. After you click on Star Reading, click on Reports. Hopefully you can see that from the presentation. That's step 2, and I will share my PowerPoint and a web page that I've created for your building. And then click on State Standards. This particular building has a high degree of mastery. Your students are doing exceptionally well. I want to use this report to show you something that I think you'll use later. I think you'll find this very informative. And again, you'll have access to it later. This is just for your building. So we've run the report, the district level report, and I've come down to this particular subskill. Quote accurately from text, explaining what the text says explicitly when drawing inferences from text. RL 5.1. This section is a dashboard that I created specifically for this building from your state assessment data analysis. So basically what I've done is taken a Excel spreadsheet and dashboarded it so that each of these bars are clickable. You'll find about this comparison or this cross-reference is first of all to show you this is a reliable assessment, the STAR standards report, because the standards crosswalk. Here you can see that same standard is revealed that the state of Missouri asked 2 questions last year to 5th graders around quoting accurately from text, drawing inferences from text. Same standard. Now, why is it important that 2 questions were asked? Why is it important that students in this building are doing very well? Because the state places emphasis on this standard. Notice certain standards, 1 question was asked. Other standards, if we jump down here to 5W.8, a writing standard, 6 questions were asked. So the state of Missouri doesn't value every standard exactly the same. More questions are asked about specific standards. Now we know that everything is important, but obviously the state of test around importance, rigor, DOK. So when we look at this report, it helps to also look at a report, first of all, to say this is reliable, this is for real. Second, to show that the state of Missouri correlates to Renaissance Learning standard reports very well. I want to show you an example where students didn't do so well. So the state standards reports, as it says, validate 2 things, the written curriculum and the teaching and learning process, the 2 things that are most important to mastery of student state standards. Let's take a minute, let's grab the post-it notes in the center of the table, and what I want you to do is I want you to reflect on what I just talked about. What are the technical things you're thinking about right now? What's the justification for the time it's going to take for digging into these reports? And does this make learning visible, and if so, talk with each other about the thought of correlating the Renaissance report with the state that I'm very excited about, a report that kind of is the foundation of this presentation, is the Student State Standards report. I like this report because I feel like it tells the parent something, it tells the student something. Most importantly, it tells the teacher and the PLC teams a lot. So let's run this report and then we'll talk about what we can draw. We're going to go back to our Renaissance Learning dashboard, start reading. We're going to go ahead and click on that. Back to reports again. Only this time we're going to click the Student State Standards report. Raise your hand if you get stuck and I'll come around and help you, or your shoulder partner might be able to help you. Step 4, I want you to tick the Common Core State Standards option, leave everything else the same. Down where it says Show Student ID, I usually click Generate the report correctly. You'll get a listing of your students and where they fall. Now, so if we take a look at the report that's generated, we have some dark green bands which reflect students that are above and beyond mastery. We have some lighter green bands that all say our students at mastery. And then the yellow are areas where we have students that are below expected mastery. We have a black trend line and we have a light blue. So light blue is where students should be at the end of the year, and the black, so this would be our predicted line and our mastery of state standards. So it's an estimation of where students will progress to. So I want to go to the third grade student state standards report. Of course, on this website I've given you some lessons you can send home in the purple folder for parents to work on with children, but let's look at this for a minute. When we look at this report, one thing we'll notice right off the bat from student to student is this standard right here is low. And what RL 3.7 asks students to do is to take illustrations and use those illustrations to draw conclusions around text. It's a comprehension question that is driven through pictorials, illustrations. As we scan down this third grade class report, one of the things we're going to notice, of course, behind every graph is something you can share with parents, what each standard is and where they fell and their estimated range of mastery and why it's so important they make a year's worth of annual growth. RL 3.7, low. We have 2 students, 3 students, it's low. Something's going on with either the written curriculum or the teaching and learning process around that standard we're going to want to take a look at as probably a PLC team. This might be a good SMART goal, might be a good SLOW student learning objective to run a cycle. One thing you also have to ask yourself is how often are we teaching students to do this? Not that we taught them or innovatively taught them, but if we just taught them in October and we don't return to it again and they take the assessment in April, will they perform well? Again, 3.7 is low. Watch as I go down through low. So you can see that this report, even though it's individualized to the student, can tell us quite a bit about a class. When we sit down with parents at parent conferences, this is part of the discussion in terms of the sub-skills that students are responsible for, their projected growth target is, where all students tend to struggle, why when I stick in the purple folder that comes home on Monday an activity for your child to do with you. We're trying to bump up that standard. Why your child has an incentive to bring that back. It's not worth points, it's worth a drawing at the end of the week. Reports are great opportunities for parent, teacher, and again, student interaction. That triad. So brain break. We're going to give up 5 minutes. Have them talk about anything they can think of but school, but what was being discussed previously. So in your case, don't talk about data, talk about anything but data, and give your brain a break. We'll come back to the student state standards report. I think it's a very important report. You can tell I'm excited about it. Before we do, let's take a look at the state standards report by group or class. This is a powerful report because it allows you to see where your students stand as a group, as a class, by sub-skill or by standard. Class, your specific group. You'll have to tick your class's name, all right? And then you're going to select the following elements. See the trend line. ID is not important, so I'm going to say no there. Leave everything else the same after you picked your group and view report. And what you're going to see is a trend line that comes across in terms of where your students fell on their efficiency. And in this case, you've had 4 screenings and where they should fall to be on track to be proficient on the state test. In this case, you can see your students are well above the trend line. What the questions that are being asked are validly reflecting what students know. you maybe have an outlier where they fell off, but I wouldn't worry about that. And reliability would be that the scores on the STAR growth assessment have external alignment to state standards, and we know that already because I've shown you that. Okay, so earlier in the session I talked about a website that I put together for this building around the Student State Standards Report. I want to show you how to use it. STAR Student State Standards Report, and correlates it to Missouri state assessments around the Missouri Learning Standards or the Common Core Standard, for you to have some really deep conversations, analysis level conversations around state assessment data and what you're seeing from the STAR reading Student State Standards. Going across the menu is, first of all, your state assessment data. And what that is, it's dashboarded for you by 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade in the area of communication arts. Okay? So by clicking on the link, we'll go to 5th grade. Up's going to come a dashboard, a clickable dashboard by standard. And one of the things that I mentioned earlier was that close correlation between STAR report standards and state standards. They crosswalk very well. And what we want to pay attention to, obviously, is where are students excelling on the state assessment and where are they excelling on the STAR student state report. When we look at the state report, as I mentioned earlier, it's very important to pay attention to how many questions were asked and around what standard. It's also important to pay attention, since this is an ascending order, in terms of how students at this school performed. You can see 5RI2 was 0.22 out of 1. By double clicking or hovering, you can actually drill into that standard. It's a clickable dashboard. So they're determining 2 or more main ideas of a text and explain how they are related. It shows that it's asked at the skill or concept DOK level, was during session 1, how many points it was worth, state standard report. Look at that exact same standard and see how students are doing. And then maybe generate some, maybe it's a SMART goal for your PLC. Don't try to eat the whole elephant at one time or chase down every rabbit at one time, but pick one thing, research around that one area, asking students to try it again and again and again until you build fluency by grade. Because if students had trouble last year, the chances are they probably are going to have trouble this year, unless we've drastically rewritten the curriculum or we've changed how we teach and learn this particular standard. So going back, you simply just close the window, find another standard. The writing standard, here's evidence that there are 8 questions around writing. In each case, they're recalling relevant information, they're drawing conclusions. You can look at your state standards, okay? And then you can jump down and say, okay, well, how, for example, in 5th grade does this correlate to the STAR student growth reports? How do I talk to parents about this particular report using the state data from the past, using current data of where their student is right now? And that's where the power of this particular report comes in handy. From the state of Missouri's area of professional learning communities shared with me one, assign grant money to focus schools. The focus schools that moved from poor performance to proficient performance most frequently put that money into propping up parent involvement. He believed, and many people at the department believe, that the most probably untapped resource out there is parent involvement. That we're not using. Here I've given you a crosswalk between the 5th grade proficiency report and the STAR student standard report. A STAR student state standard report, where I have shown you how to you've got a scroller there that shows you how to run that report in case you forget. Just having this website, it should be completely turnkey. You have an arrow here that shows exactly what we just did to run that report. Because my understanding is this building is not using that report right now. So simply by following the slides, you can run that report. Some ideas on how to use that report. We're going to break into small groups here in a little bit and brainstorm some ideas on how we could get parents more involved. And then more information about the difference between the projected scale score, the current scale score, the black line, and what the report is showing. And then I've even given you your individual student reports. I've run them for you and they're PDF'd and linked so you can easily access them. Then you have some links also to the student state standard report with descriptions. I think those are important. Standard explanations, so you won't have to look those up. I'm sitting right there in front of you. The standards here. Next to that, you can have the state report, state standards, and then crosswalking the two and looking for correlations should be a lot easier for you to do that. So your teams will be well situated to say, hey, how reliable is this report on this standard to how our students are doing on this state? And that sums it up. So that concludes what I had to talk to you about today. If you would do me a favor and grab one last post-it note and put a star on it so I'll know that this is the you're putting on that post-it note. Take a minute and do that, please. You to say you appreciated this session because, and maybe give me a point that I should do again, something that meant something to you. But then I also want you to call me out. I always loved having my students call me out at the end of a class period. This did not work for me, and here's why. Tell me how I can improve this session. Chasing too many rabbits, as we know, is dangerous because when we look at too many standards at once, we do not get anything done. When we chase two rabbits at the same time, we typically catch neither. So I really want to challenge you to put your emphasis on one particular standard at a time, know that students have mastered it, and step back and prioritize. Because the most important word, I believe, and the word that I'm going to finish on today is focus. Thank you. I appreciate your time.